Any other business y'all need to put out or talk about, or are we good to go?
Ready for you. The one thing I wanted to is that Ned is of the family of Oliver Parks, who founded Parks College, my alma mater. Cool. And maybe you'll talk a little bit about that too.
Well, thank you. Yeah, Oliver, technically, according to ancestry, he's a cousin, but obviously we called him Uncle Oliver. He was my dad's cousin, so that keeps him a cousin, but we called him Uncle Oliver. It's kind of weird to call somebody like that a cousin, but technically he's a cousin, but he was Uncle Oliver to me. So this has been in my blood for a long time. And let me get this shared with you. Well, let me do this first. Hold on a minute. Slideshow. There we go. From the beginning. Awesome. And screen 2. And I think we got it. Are you seeing my first slide? Okay, great. So yeah, I hail from Akron, Ohio. For those of you that don't know, we're about 30 miles south of Cleveland, which makes me a Cleveland Browns fan, which puts me in a constant state of grief and mourning, starting around August through February, and then we kind of climb out of that funk. And our alma mater, or our motto here is wait till next year. That's we're really good at saying that. We just are past masters at saying wait till next year. But we're not here to talk about football. We're here to talk about airplanes and helicopters and all the like. I kind of got started actually in Colorado. I got my private rating in 1979. And then I went in the military in the early 80s, flew in the Army, flew helicopters in the Army. I've flown offshore, Gulf of Mexico, flew for a couple of hospitals. I now run a consulting company, have for 24 years, and aviation is still part of it. I flight instruct in both helicopters and airplanes, mostly in Cirrus now, but in others as well. And then I do this. So let me kind of tell you how I got here, because I think that's an important piece to this whole puzzle. What you're looking at in this picture is an S-76 landing. By the way, this is a snapshot from a video at an airport. So we have the entire video from long before the incident to long after the incident, for that matter, because the videos run continuously from the FBO building. But what you're seeing is a snapshot that I pulled off of that video. And you see the S-76 landing, and then you see an airplane behind it. That airplane is a RANS 20. It was still in its 25 or 40 hour. I'm not a home builder, so I apologize if I got that wrong, but whatever that time period is that you have to fly the airplane before you get your airworthiness certificate, the gentleman was working on that. As you can see, he's on a left bank at almost 90 degrees. About a second after this, the airplane was inverted, stalled, smacked to the ground, killed the pilot, and burst into flames. What you don't see on this picture is to the right of those 3 airplanes that are parked there. I'm standing there cooking at an annual September clam bake that a pilots group I'm in gets together and does it every year. At a hangar that, again, as you can't see that, there's 3 hangars off to the right of that picture over there. One of them is the home base for the EMS helicopter, and the other 2 are privately owned. And what you don't see is in one of those hangars, we have our clam bake every year, a bunch of us. And so there was probably 60 of us that stood there and just happened to look up when the helicopter came in, and unfortunately probably had more witnesses to this aircraft accident than almost any other, because we were all standing there watching it. So being a helicopter guy, I was out there, and a witness. I was out there the next day with another helicopter guy that was at the group. He was a Marine helicopter pilot. I was in the Army. We both have extensive backgrounds. The NTSB guy happened to be a helicopter pilot, although that was not by design. He just happened to be the guy that caught the investigation and flew up that night and was out there the next morning at the crash site. And we had the FAA guy there, and we watched the video together, and we were all a little dumbfounded that it was very obvious that the airplane had gotten tangled up in wake turbulence behind the helicopter in forward flight. And the reason that this got our attention is because we, in the helicopter community, talk about downwash ad nauseum. I mean, nonstop. We teach it, we talk about it, we worry about it. It's a constant conversation we have. I can promise you, I don't think I've ever had a conversation, and I can't tell you how many people that I've had this conversation with that we've never, ever had a conversation about what's left behind the helicopter when it's in forward flight, and how is that different than when it is in a hover situation. So that's kind of what brought us here, was this lack of understanding and this lack of education. Now, I'm going to talk about a lot of things in this presentation, and I don't want you to misconstrue anything I say as a criticism of anyone, including the FAA, air traffic controllers, pilots, helicopter pilots, fixed wing pilots. I'm going to say this a couple of times. We don't know what we don't know. And when we don't know something, it's pretty hard to hold us accountable and say we did something wrong when we just flat don't know it. And this is not a topic that has been discussed. So we're discussing it now, and here we go. So I'm going to try to bring two terms into one. And the first term I'm going to talk about is downwash, rotor downwash. And this is a term that's actually fairly well known. This is something that even if you learned it anecdotally, just by watching a helicopter in the dirt or in the snow, or in fresh cut grass with the grass clippings going all over the place, it's pretty easy to figure out what's happening there when the helicopter's out of hover. Some of you might have learned it a little bit more academically with somebody talking about it, or actually giving a lesson or something along those lines. But rotor downwash is an occurrence that happens when the helicopter is either at a hover or a slow hover taxi. So let me stop there and give you a little different, let you know the three different ways that a helicopter can taxi. Because a helicopter, when we say we're going to taxi, it's important to know what kind of taxi we're going to do, not only for us, but for anybody operating around the helicopter. So let's start with ground taxi. Ground taxi is almost, and I emphasize the word almost entirely for helicopters that have wheels. So Blackhawks, S-76, CH-47s, AH-64 Apaches, there's Sky Cranes, CH-53s, and Jolly Green Giants. There's a few others out there. So can a skidded helicopter, a helicopter with skids, a ground taxi? The short answer to that question is yes. We try not to do it because it really tears up some very expensive skids. However, we can do it, and I've done it. I did it in a horrible snowstorm that if I tried to pick it up to a hover, I would have gone into whiteout and I couldn't have gotten anywhere. So I had to ground taxi all the way up to the ramp area and get off the runway. But it's not something that a skidded helicopter does, only under certain circumstances. So it's rare for a skidded helicopter to ground taxi. Now, hover taxi has got a very definite definition. I believe that the ACS, I always got to try to remember, because the ACS and the Army had two different sets of regs, and I always tend to get them backwards. In the Army, it was 3 feet plus or minus a foot. I think the ACS is actually 4 feet plus or minus a foot, but it doesn't matter. It's low to the ground, 3 to 6 feet. We'll call it 3 to 6 feet. How's that? And we're hovering at a stationary, or if we're taxiing, we're moving in whatever direction, forward, left, right, rear, because we can go in all four directions, but we'll assume that we're taxiing forward for our conversation today. And we're doing that at the apparent work of a brisk walk, or maybe a jog, if you can understand it that way. We're almost always somewhere under 16, 15 knots, absolute maximum, usually slower than that. And then there's air taxi is another kind of taxi that's generally up over, somewhere around 100 feet, 75 feet, 50 feet, somewhere in that vicinity. And we would use that to move from one side of the airfield to the other, or to move from one, maybe a large field, and we want to just hop over there, and it's just much faster and it's quicker, safer. There's a lot of reasons we would do an air taxi. Sometimes you'll hear, like I might land at the south end of the airfield that's got a 9,000 or an 8,000 foot runway, and I want to get all the way to the north side. And they say hover to, and I go, I'd like to do an air taxi. Most air traffic controllers will know what that term really means. I had one go, what are you doing? And I go, I'm air taxiing. And they go, well, I didn't know what that was. Oh, okay, whatever. Maybe they should have. That I don't know. I'd have to ask a controller, but it doesn't matter. We would kind of jump up and move briskly up there and then land again. So those are the three different kinds of taxis that a helicopter can do. Also, when we're at a hover, no matter whether we're taxiing or not, there's two things I want you to remember. We are in full flight. We are in full flight. When you're taxiing your airplane, or I'm taxiing my airplane, I'm not in full flight. In fact, I'm in no flight at all. So the reason I bring that out is I want you to start to think about, as you operate around helicopters and see them operate, I want you to be thinking they're in full flight. We're producing full lift. We are in full flight. And the other thing I want you to remember about a helicopter in a hover of any kind is we are man-made moving microbursts. So I want you to think about those two things. We're in full flight and we're man-made moving microburst. All right. Now let me talk about the next terminology, which is rotorcraft wake vortices. And these are what the helicopter leaves behind it when it's in forward flight. And forward flight for us occurs when we're above ETL, also known as effective translational lift, which occurs in almost all helicopters, somewhere in the 16 to 20 knot range, somewhere in there. And of course, that's a no wind condition, right? I've actually been above ETL at a hover in a 20 knot wind, a 25 knot wind, a 30 knot wind. So we were already above ETL because the wind is moving over the helicopter and ultimately giving us clean air for our rotor system to fly in. When we're in a hover, it's dirty air because it comes down, it hits, and it comes back up around, and it kind of circulates around the rotor tips, and it stays there. So we're in what we call dirty air. When we're moving forward, we're in above ETL, what we call above ETL, and that generally happens in the 16 to 20 knot range. I want to just go, let's just call it helicopter wake turbulence. Why do I want to do that? Because we all know what wake turbulence is, every last one of us in this room. And if you don't, shame on you. I know you all do. I don't know of a check ride done. It's certainly not at the private commercial stage, that's for sure, or the CFI stage, that the examiner is probably talking about wake turbulence. It's a hot button item. It always has been. It should always be. And, I've talked to DPE friends of mine, and I said, do you talk about wake turbulence at every check ride? And they'll tell you, a couple of them will say every check ride. Some will not talk about it in an instrument check ride necessarily, but they'll absolutely talk about it. CFI, commercial, private, even multi-engine, commercial multi-engine rides. They'll usually almost always bring the topic up. The reason I want to combine it into one term is because I don't want, if we could get this approved, long story there, what I don't want to do is go out there and say downwash, rotorcraft wake vortices, wake turbulence on the fixed wing, but it's vortices on the helicopter. Oh, but a fixed wing also does vortices. Good Lord, have mercy. Let's just call it wake turbulence and be done with it. We know, ooh, gets my attention, I should stay away. So that's kind of what I'm advocating for. And that's kind of how I'm going to work it with you. All right, so it was September 18th, 2021. You can certainly pull the NTSB report and read it if you like. It was a RANS 20, not this particular one. I just pulled that off the internet to show a picture of one. it was, here's what I will tell you what we know, and I will tell you what we don't know. We know because we have it on video and with a timestamp. So this is how we know what we know. The pilot taxied out to the departure end of runway 02 and sat at the end of the runway for 7 minutes. We don't know why. We can speculate, but we don't know why. We know that the helicopter was coming back from a mission, that the pilot and the helicopter pilot talked to each other on the radio, and the pilot asked the helicopter if they would sidestep the runway as soon as they could so they could take off. The helicopter pilot said, absolutely, glad to do it. They came in, they landed, they sidestepped the runway, and the RANs took off. This happened at the Wadsworth Airport, which is about 12 miles west of Akron, Ohio, 3 Golf 3. A very typical 1960s built airport. As the helicopter was coming in on a right base, very typical operation. This helicopter's based there. They come from that direction a lot to try to minimize traffic pattern and noise complaint areas. They try to stay out of that. There's a fairly decent size residential area to the due east of the airport. So they drop to the south to stay away from that a little bit and be friendly. And then they come in from that way, and it just minimizes a lot of their traffic flying in the traffic pattern, which is what we as helicopter pilots are actually encouraged to do by the FAA, is avoid the flow of fixed wing traffic as best you can. So we do. We do all kinds of things. So anyway, coming in, made their calls, 2 mile out, right base, whatever it was. And the pilot asked them to sidestep. They said, okay. They saw the pilot taxi out onto the runway and hold. I am not an advocate of that at uncontrolled airports, but that's what they did. I don't know that it would have made a difference in this particular instance. Having done that, the helicopter, as you can see, turned their base quite a bit short so they wouldn't fly over top of that airplane, and expedited to cross in front of it and exit to the west side of the runway to go into their base area and land. As you see here, that after the helicopter passed them, there was no delay, and it was approximately 25 seconds from the takeoff roll to the upset. It was that fast. And before we could run out there, the smoke and fire had started. So that was as pretty close to instantaneous. Let me get you some context. Now, look, I'm not advocating that anybody memorize any of these numbers, but I want to give you some context so you have a better understanding of this and a few other things I'm going to share with you. So in the upper left-hand corner, we have the Jet Ranger brothers, the 206 B3, or the B models, I should say, and the L models, which is a larger extended version. You can see the weight differences there. But you'll notice that their rotor blades aren't that much different, 4 feet total in a total rotor blade diameter, so 33 and 37 feet. Interestingly enough, a lot lighter helicopter, the R-44, and it has a 33 foot, so exactly that of the B model Jet Ranger, which is, another is considerably heavier, larger. An H300, a little bit smaller rotor system at 26, but then again, it's got 3 blades, so they can produce more lift with a shorter amount. S76 got 44 feet, so a pretty good size rotor system, and they max out at 11.7. Here's 4 more helicopters that we are all 8 of these helicopters, or 9, I guess, we're very, very prone to see in the US. So that's actually the Magnum PIH Hughes 500. It's a 27-footer. The Black Hawk is the monster of this group anyway, and I wouldn't even call it a monster. 22,000 pounds and a 53-foot system. The EC-130, a very common EMS helicopter and police helicopter across the United States, coming in at about 35 feet rotor system. And the 145 is about 36 feet, a little bit heavier, big brother. And then there's the EC-130, 145, and then the 135 is right in between those. I didn't want to burden you with a picture. So what is the context? The context is let's talk in 30-foot increments and understand that somewhere around 30 feet on the small side, and with the exception of the Black Hawk, 40 feet on the high side, and we're in pretty good shape there. Even 50 feet on the high side with the S-76, but your smaller helicopters are all in the 30-foot range-ish, and you'll see why that comes into play here in just a minute. So I want to just a quick update and a refresher on downwash. The downwash is when the helicopter's at a hover, we're pulling the air from above us straight down. It hits the ground, it moves out sharply. Some of it curls up in vortices immediately off the rotor tips and comes back down through the system and creates some serious winds. Now, why do I care about the rotor disc area or the diameter of helicopters? Because our teachings have been and still are to remain 3 rotor disc diameters away from a helicopter and hover. And so I made this conversion for you here. The S-76 is 144 feet exactly. Let's round it up to 150 and be safe. Bell 206, let's make it 100. And R-22, let's make it 75. The R-44 is right there with the 70s, or with the 206, by the way. The 22 is the little brother, so I took it down to one of the smallest. So 75 to 150 feet. We need to stay clear of that area. As I said, Wadsworth is a very typical U.S. airport built in the mid-60s. And what I want to point out to you is the criteria for airports in the 60s is different than it is today. So in its day, the standoff distance from the taxiway to the center line of taxiway, center line of runway, was probably, the FAA wouldn't have paid to build it if it hadn't been in compliance. So whatever it was in the day, 135 feet was fine. I can tell you today, if the FAA came in and said, we're going to give you a new taxiway, they would move it out because the runway safety zone areas have increased. Why? Airplanes have gotten faster. Airplanes have gotten longer widths on their wings. They want a longer standoff. They can put a bigger airplane into a smaller airport than they could back then. So there's a ton of different reasons, but they would be moving that runway to the west in this case, if they were to come in and say, we're going to give you a new taxiway, a complete rebuild, not just a overlay, but a total rebuild, they almost assuredly move it. I can tell you that many airports, that's what they're doing. So this typical 35 foot, 75 foot wide, it gives us about 135 feet. Why do I care? Well, because at that airport, if that Black Hawk is sitting on the runway and it's fooling around at 155 feet, you're within the danger zone if you're taxiing or taking off for landing, depending upon where you are or where they are, right? If it's that S-76, 144 feet, we're still in the danger zone, right? If it's a Bell Jet Ranger, probably okay. Hughes 500, probably okay. But if it's any of these larger helicopters, we're not okay. So I just want to give you some parameters, and at your home airport that you operate a lot, probably ought to go on Google and go, what is the standoff? What is that distance between the taxiway that I live on and the runway that I live on? Probably wouldn't be a bad thing to know. You're not going to do it at every place you go in and out of, but the place you live, especially if you have a lot of helicopter operations, I would want to know that. Akron Fulton Airport, my home airport, bigger, 6,300 foot. It was actually built prior to World War II. And it, 400 foot standoff, 150 foot wide runway, much bigger. Even in those days, the standoff was much bigger. So you're probably in pretty good shape at an airport that size. From the taxiway, watch what happens. Watch what happens. Here's a couple of interesting scenarios. So Chandler, Arizona on the left there. You can see where all the aircraft are parked. That's a huge ramp area. And you'll see 275 feet from the center of the runway to the taxiway. Hey, I'm in good shape. Almost no matter what's over there, I'm probably okay. But what happens if off that taxiway to the parking area, there's a helicopter hovering up and down the taxiway, and I'm over there taxiing on that ramp area, or vice versa, which can easily happen, right? That helicopter's parked just off that dirt over there, and it's maybe 60, 70, 80, 100 feet away. I could have a big problem if I'm on that taxiway. Come over here to Mesquite in Metro Airport in Texas. I've got a different problem. My distance standoff from the taxiway to the runway, probably not a problem, but I'm taxiing over there, and 117 feet away, there's a helicopter parked right at the edge of that dirt or grass area, whichever it happens to be, and they can't see you. You're behind them. And the tower says, oh, you're cleared to take off from the ramp area at your own risk. Or you're, clear to, to taxi to, runway, blah, 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 from wherever, right? I don't know you're behind me. I can't see you. And I've been cleared to take off or to pick it to a hover and go somewhere. And you go behind me and you're pick the airplane. And I either get a wingtip because I rocked you up or worse, right? Even some more damage. So not a good scenario even here. By the way, I can tell you as a helicopter pilot, and I've moved helicopters all over this country. When I go to an airport, I work very hard to park somewhere where my tail rotor can hang out over off any movement area, usually grass or wherever there's not going, the probability of people walking or vehicles traveling is pretty low, because there's very few things that will send a chill up and down my spine than sitting there on the ground at a hover and people and vehicles and airplanes wandering around behind me. Because guess what? I can't see what you're doing. I can't stop you from what you're doing. I don't know what you're doing. I don't know if you're paying attention. And it just is enough to make my skin crawl. So I work very hard to keep my tail out over somewhere that it's not going to be a problem. I remember when I started flying the NOTAR helicopters, I flew 600s, the single engine, and then the twin engine 900. And we don't have a tail rotor. It's just a air thrust back there. It actually took me a while to get used to the idea that, oh man, this is great. I don't have to worry about it. This is awesome. So the worst that was going to happen, I was going to blow your hat off. But I can tell you that that's enough to make my skin crawl. So that's why I would park with my tail back there and I can't see behind me, because I don't want to park sideways. That's a little better because at least there's some less chance that somebody's going to run into it, but I prefer to have the tail out over an area where it's protected. Let's talk about just parking. This is an interesting situation at Midlothian. I can't park up next to the taxiway because there's no separation between the parking area and the taxiway, which, by the way, just so you know, the FAA hates those. They hate them. They're trying to do away with them right now. They don't like direct access to a taxiway or from a taxiway to the runway. Long story there. I won't bore you with it, but they're trying to do away with those. But there's still plenty of them out there. So I can't park at the edge because I might, in fact, literally hang out over the taxiway. So they say, well, we'll put him right in the middle. So I'm now right in the middle where my little measurement is 274 feet. Now I've split that right in half. So I'm a mess, forward, back, left, right. Somebody parks next to me. There's no tie downs there. It's a 150 or it's a Grumman and they've left the canopy open, or it's a Cub or Picket, right? Doesn't matter what it is. I've literally seen everything. And now I go to leave, can't find the pilot. I'm a little hesitant to mess with somebody else's airplane. I'm also really hesitant to pick it up to a hover and do damage to it. So now what do I do? So for me, this parking situation here is a nightmare. I hate it when they put me in places like that. I will argue with them not to put me there. It's a real problem. Same thing actually over on at Lancaster. The difference there being I've got the grass area, but you'll notice that the taxiway comes. So I can't park next to the grass area anyway. So I've got the same problem over there. This occurs a lot. So at a hover, just as 3 rotor disc away in all directions. Maintain clearance while it's at a hover, you're probably going to be all right. And you can, and the reason I wanted you to share some of those rotor diameters is so you could just kind of have an idea, right? Oh, it's 30, 35 feet. So, oh yeah, that's about 90 or 100 or 150 feet. And you kind of have some conceptual idea of space. So you say, I don't know how far to taxi away from that thing. Well, now you can kind of have an idea. If you want to understand what we're doing at Rotor Wash, there actually was a calculation I found. A boatload of work goes into this calculation, but the disc area has got to be calculated out. We throw air density. Actually, air density comes into play into the calculation. We take the weight of the aircraft, divide it by 2. I picked 10,000 because that S-76 at Wadsworth maxes out at 11.8. They were coming back in from a mission. The pilot told me he was probably around 10,000 pounds. So I just said, okay, great. So we take that, we cut it in half, we run it through the rest of the calculation, convert it into knots, and guess what? At a hover, a 10,000 pound helicopter with a 48-foot diameter is putting out 52 knots. Well, let me let that sink in for just a minute. Now, you're all sitting around. It's a beautiful day out there in Washington. Somebody pokes their head in and says, hey, there's a thunderstorm coming and they got 52 knot winds. You would be assholes and elbows running around like crazy people to tie down every airplane you could get your hands on or get it in a hangar. If you heard a helicopter coming in, none of you would move. Again, not a criticism. We don't know what we don't know. We think about it different. The mind just doesn't compute it. I hope it computes it now. 52 knots. Let me show you what that looks like a little bit different. Here is the same sort of a calculation in a graph format. Basically, what you have here is a close end of the helicopter. You'll notice that the speed isn't all that much. It actually picks up speed as it goes out away from the helicopter. At about the 50-foot range, you'll notice it can get up close to 100. And then while it drops quickly at 65 feet, from that point forward, it doesn't drop off all that fast, does it? It begins to dissipate, but it does not dissipate at a high rate of speed. So it's still out there at 90, at 100 feet, depending upon the helicopter, it's still doing 50 miles an hour, 40 miles an hour, whatever. That's a lot. That's a lot. We are a man-made moving microburst. Man-made moving microburst. We have all talked about this. We see the signs. Certainly you've seen pictures like this, or you've witnessed it in person. You go, wow, those guys really kick up a mess. Yeah, we do. We do. We're kind of annoying. I get it. But I go into uncontrolled fields, heck, even controlled fields, but this doesn't really matter. And this is what I'm told to do. Taxi to the pumps. We'll get you some fuel. Great. Awesome. Hey, gang, you got an airplane over there. Could you move it? Oh, it'll be fine. I've literally been told that. No, it won't. No, it won't. I've got a 10,000 pound Huey. I'm going to taxi up there. I will promise you that unchalked Grumman will go somewhere and the owner's not going to like it. I'm probably not going to like it. You're probably not going to like it. And so then people get cranky. I got to go move my airplane because these damn helicopters. I get it. I get it. But my problems are not over. Let's assume for a moment the airplane's not there. Take a look at those 2 fueling cabinets. The doors are open on both. I have slammed those doors shut with a helicopter. Slammed them shut. So it'll pick those babies right up and slam them shut. The only saving grace is if their lock is working, at least they'll stay that way. Oh, still, my problems aren't over. I will guarantee you around those tanks are gloves, rags, bottles for washing windshields, unsecured trash cans with unsecured lids and unsecured trash in them, 2 to 3 step aluminum step ladders that I can promise you, because I've seen them, they will in fact go airborne. Trust me on that. I've seen wooden ladders slide across the tarmac. Let's see, what else will I find there? I think that's just about it. I'm worried about doing damage to your stuff. And I'm going to be honest with you, I'm very worried about doing damage to my rotor blades, because the last thing I want to happen is that aluminum step ladder go up in the air and come back down through my rotor blades. That's an expensive afternoon. Expensive. All right, this was just last year. This lady was killed when a landing helicopter knocked her over and killed her. So let me talk about this just a little bit. What's important to understand about this tragedy is the helicopter was landing exactly where they were supposed to land, and the lady was walking exactly where she was supposed to walk. Nobody was doing anything wrong. What hadn't been calculated, more than likely, is where her walk area should have been, or the clear area should have been. I can tell you in my time in EMS, this was always a huge argument, because the hospitals don't want to give up any parking. And we would say, you got us too close, or you got us in an area, especially on a ground-based. And they didn't have the funds or the money or the 9 million other reasons that they didn't want a rooftop helipad. Maybe structurally they couldn't do it. And just a side note, we landed at one hospital that they put the helipad right next to the air handling unit, so our jet fumes filled up the entire hospital. Brilliant, guys. Great move. So we had to call them ahead of time so they could turn off the air handling for the entire hospital while we landed or took off. Somebody was really thinking that one through. So this is dangerous stuff, is what I'm trying to point out to you. And even when we're doing everything right, sometimes we get it wrong. We don't know what we don't know. Now, I'm going to share with you what absolutely everything the FAA says about downwash and helicopter wake turbulence and forward flight. You say, Ned, our meeting, come on, dude, our meeting doesn't last that long. Don't worry, it's not much. Here's the AC on wake turbulence, aircraft wake, all wake turbulence, 90-23 Gulf. You should avoid taxiing or flying within a distance of 3 rotor diameters of the helicopter. Great, I'm glad to hear it. In forward flight, we put some energy out behind us, and they're similar to big, large fixed-wing aircraft. Yeah, very true statement. And you should avoid vortices, since the helicopters in forward flight airspeeds are often very low, which generates a strong wake turbulence. I don't care if it's low or not. I got news for you. We're putting out some nasty stuff behind us. That's it. That's the AC. Here's the AIM right here. Basically what the AC says, if you've read very many ACs and then read the AIM, you'll know it. The AIM just says a little bit more, a little bit less, whatever. But this is basically what it says. It's almost word for, in fact, some of it is word for word. That's it. I told you it wouldn't take long. All right, let's go to forward flight, because this is where the aircraft of that accident got into trouble. And I've now found out many, many others. This is much what it looks like. It's coming off both sides at the tips of the rotor blades, circling around from the outside to the inside, very much like a fixed wing aircraft. Now, when we put together the working group, which consisted of myself, Helicopter Association International, AOPA, National Association of Flight Instructors, Aeromedical Operators Conference, several other smaller groups, and then some interested parties. When we put the group together, we all said, we want to put out guidance, but we can't do it without some scientific background. We're not just going to make stuff up and say, oh, this sounds pretty good. We didn't want to do that. So we went looking for investigations and so on and so forth. And I will tell you that when it comes to a helicopter at a hover, there is so much information out there, it's not even funny. I mean, it is stacked on top of each other. When you go and find it for a helicopter in forward flight, here it is. That's it. If there's more, we have not found them yet. So if you find one, please send it to me because we're still looking. Done in 94, published in 96. Flight test investigation of rotorcraft wake vortices in forward flight. That's it. I'm going to give you the findings. Well, first, let me talk just the findings and kind of how they got there. What they did is they took 5 helicopters, varying sizes, CH-53, which is about 70,000 pounds, CH-47, 50,000 pounds, a Black Hawk, an S-76, and a Huey. Equipped it with smoke, took it up to 5,000 feet, ran it at cruise, and then they had 2 aircraft that would probe into it to see what would happen. A T-34 in trail and a super decathlon crossing over from behind. And they had it do them a couple different ways. They wanted to know what the airplane would do if a pilot didn't try to keep it straight and level, and then what the airplane could do if they did try to keep it straight and level. And here's what they found, the condensed version. No matter what, the airplane lost full control at a half mile, period. Total loss of control at 5,000 feet with an aerobatic pilot and an aerobatic plane. Not a big deal. On short final, yeah, a really big deal. The decathlon experienced a shudder or flapping of the wings. It literally flexed up and down, is what how the pilot described it. Apparently, he bailed out of the maneuver and said, "Yeah, I'm not doing that again." And these are, engineering test pilots, so they're not lightweights. The advancing blade. So as we move forward, American-made helicopter, the advancing blade to be on my right. It's going forward with me, retreating blade on my left. The advancing blade leaves more turbulence than the retreating blade. This is interesting, the vortex separation. So in forward straight and level flight, they're even off the back of the rotor system. But as the aircraft climbs, there is an increase, separation increase in descending flight, pardon me. So when we're in a descent, so coming down an ILS or a landing or whatever, the vortices actually separate, they go farther apart. And when we're in a climb, they actually come closer together. So what does that mean to you, the fixed wing pilot? When I'm in a descent, there's a wide air area that I can kill you with. And when I'm in a climb, there's a closer but a much more violent area. Neither scenario is very good. More blades, larger vortex size. I'm not sure why on that. The report doesn't quite, I don't know that they even said it in the report, but I thought it was interesting. So forward flight separation, a minimum of 3 nautical miles, a minimum of 105 seconds. We're actually saying 2 minutes. We're increasing that just a little bit. And a minimum of 3 rotor discs at a hover. All right, here are some very interesting videos that I want to share with you. That's an S-76, 60 knots, a 5-degree descent. That's some nasty stuff back there. All right. This actually occurred very close to where I live and where I fly out of. This is EMS helicopter. This is a little downwash lesson here for you. They're leaving to go. They got 2 pilots, 2 medical crew. They're leaving to go get a patient on a medical run. They did not complete the run. They were in the midst of a huge construction project. You can see in the upper right-hand corner of the video some flashing lights and some barriers there. They're putting in an entire new taxiway at this airport. That was some of that construction erosion silt fence or whatever they call it, that fabric stuff they put down. From what I understand, the lawsuit is still going on between everybody and everybody. So why do I share that one with you? We all need to be on a high vigilant alert from a standpoint of FOD, foreign object debris. We need to be careful about where we park helicopters, what we leave laying around. Everybody needs to go on high alert here, not just a helicopter operator, FBO operators, airport management, all of us just being out there. We just all need to keep an eye out. This was in the United Kingdom. This is a 172 departing, and a Robinson R44 had departed just ahead of them.
So even though the wing turbulence here was a non-event, it reminded me that I always have to be vigilant, as the amount of control input to correct for the turbulence from an R44 crossing the runway was quite significant.
Ready to go? Yep. Good. Rockcliffe, traffic Golf Foxtrot, we're on the roll 27, Rockcliffe. Up time is 11. I've got that in my head. Yeah, I got it, wrote it down.
Now watch his aileron input. Watch his aileron input as he
is alive, 55 rotate.
As he climbs out. He's going to go to full left aileron deflection.
Oh. Feel that? Yep. That was.
Now watch it up close. He goes to a full deflection to keep it straight and level. The VSI went from about 300 feet to 0 and then popped right straight up to about 700 feet a minute. Thankfully, it was up, not down.
That was full lock with the bloody aileron. Okay, 20-degree right.
This video is of a departing Black Hawk. You'll see it right here in the upper left-hand corner at about 39 seconds in, something like that, maybe 40 seconds in. You'll see an SR-20 come in, a poor student on a solo flight, come in for a landing. And the SR-20 will come in the upper left-hand corner in just a couple seconds. Right there, and it cartwheels down the runway. The pilot got out with a broken either wrist or ankle. I can't remember which. Obviously, the airplane was destroyed. A PC-12, for those of you that don't know, is about a 9,500-pound airplane with a, I don't know, an 800 or 1,000 horsepower Pratt & Whitney hanging off the front. So it's no lightweight airplane. A departing Black Hawk and a landing PC-12. In the video, you'll see that PC-12 just come into view right here. There's the PC-12. Now you might wonder, why was that PC-12 landing so close behind that Black Hawk? And you might even say that with a little judgment in your voice, because the air traffic controllers are not required to keep separation between these two classes of aircraft. And they told the Black Hawk to take off, and they cleared the PC-12 to land. Again, I'm not blaming the ATC guys. I'll tell you a little bit about why that is occurring in just a moment. This is a Cessna 120 and a UH-1. The UH-1 is the finest helicopter ever built, period, full stop. I might have flown those in the Army. I'm a little biased. This is in California, and I believe that the UH-1 is a Cal Fire UH-1, and they're coming in to land.
Wow.
Luckily, the airplane did not hit the hangars. The pilot did survive. Now, this one is really interesting. A Cessna 172 and a CH-47. CH-47 is a grosses out at 50,000 pounds. I actually have talked to this pilot, really interesting guy. He saw this presentation, got a hold of me and said, hey, I have a video that I never put out on the internet. Would you like it? I said, well, sure. So he sends it to me. And you'll notice right off the nose of the aircraft, just above the horizon, you'll see a black dot out there. The sun is setting. He said he went back and measured the distance of where the CH-47 was, about 2,500 feet away from him. And he knew that because of the runway length and so on. And he's probably not far off in his estimation. And he said he waited about 45 seconds after the Black Hawk or the Chinook departed to when he took off. Now, I've edited some of this video, and edited some of that weight out of it just for time expediency. So the 45 seconds had already occurred. All right. So I get this, and I'm texting and calling, and I'm conversing with the pilot, and he just happened to say, finally I get this email from probably about a week later, something like that. And he goes, hey, I don't know if you can do anything with this or not, but he said, I have the track log from ForeFlight on this. I went, oh, send that over. So he did, because I can take a track log, upload it to CloudAhoy, and I can get this kind of a back end plus a bunch of other data. And I use this in my instruction a lot, and it is a really, really helpful tool, and it is really, really accurate. So I uploaded it in CloudAhoy, and I'm going to play you that video, and you're going to see what it would have looked like from the inside without the oh crap moment and the cameraman dropping probably his phone in his lap. So they take off, they start a little climb. They don't get very far up at all. There they go. Immediately crank over to about a 60-degree bank. Hold that for a moment. The aircraft rolls left again, and this is where it really gets my attention. It rolls left and then turns right. I'm not even sure how you do that. Okay, we're a moving microburst. Stay three rotor disc rotor diameters away, please. In forward flight, we're a mess. Stay away from us behind. And then we've created the 3-3-2 rule, which is 3 rotor discs, 3 nautical miles in 2 minutes. Here's a poster that I will share you where you can go download that, print them off, share them, put them up, talk about them. National Association of Flight Instructors, AOPA, and HAI have been supporting a lot of this. They supported a lot of this, the poster work and so on and so forth. Now, here's a lot that we regulators can do. Some of it we can do right now, right? Public outreach, I'm doing it. We need a lot of money for additional testing. That's going to be hard to get. But what I want you to see, and you were asking, why would the controller allow that to happen with the PC-12 and so on and so forth? Here's the deal. According to the 7110 manual for controllers, they do not report caution, helicopter wake turbulence, or provide separation like they would with large fixed wing and smaller aircraft until the helicopter is over 41,000 pounds. There are 3 that regularly fly in the US that weigh that much. A CH-53, a Chinook CH-47, and the old Sky Crane, which are still out there, but they're not very prevalent at all, used mostly for firefighting, frankly. Yeah, 41,000 pounds. You saw what a Robinson did. You saw what Blackhawks can do, and others as well. I've seen what Apaches can do. Part of our problem, so you know, is all of these accidents are classified by the NTSB as loss of control. which they are. The problem with that is there's no way to search the records to say how many were loss of control as a result of helicopter wake turbulence. And because they don't put a subsequent back end classification to loss of control. They say loss of control, and then in the narrative they will say it, but you can't search the narrative because their system isn't set up that way. So to go out and say this is a problem, the FAA, everybody says, hey, there's not many out there that's happened. Well, that's because you don't classify them as loss of control because of helicopter wake turbulence. They always have some other stuff going on there. It is a loss of control. I'm not arguing that, but that's really one of the big issues. So I'm going to stop talking. There's my contact information. That's my YouTube channel. Also, thepilotsgrind.com is also where you can get, I have an entire page there for just this topic. You can download the PDF off of there. You can watch this presentation I've done elsewhere. I will continue to add information there. So let me just take questions, comments, whatever you'd like to know. You can just fire away and I'm here to talk to you guys.
Ned, do winds have any different kind of effect with helicopter wake turbulence than they do with aircraft wake turbulence?
Yeah, it's a great question, and we don't really know. I mean, we're all smart people, and I'm not going to sit here and tell you that winds wouldn't have any impact on it. It clearly is going to move them, but the testing has not been done, or we haven't been able to find it to know. It does in the downwash. There is some information there. The problem is that the downwash, would hold it upwind. So if it's coming down out of the helicopter going upwind, if it's a strong wind, it probably would hold it back some and it would move it. There's no question about that. But in forward flight, they did not do that. So I don't have an answer for you. And here's the other thing to remember. So you're following, I'm in a helicopter, you're following me on final. You're 4 miles behind me, whatever. And we have the old rule, right? Land beyond or take off before, and that's all well and good. The problem is I terminate my landing at a hover, so I don't land. I'm still flying, creating a mess for you to come into out in front of me as well as behind me and to the side. So it complicates the conversation. So time is your best friend. Utilize it. Go ahead. Anybody else?
Is there any indication that to try and continue the role rather than fight it would be better?
Boy, that I've taken upset training, and I will tell you that the guy that I take it from has told me that is probably the worst thing you can do. I'm not an expert in that world. I'm not an aerodynamic or a aerobatic pilot. I've done upset training and I've done spin training, and that's about all I've done. I don't know that. If I was I suppose at 5,000 feet, sure. I don't know that on short final that would be such a great idea, especially in a non-aerobatic airplane, and especially if you're not a pretty sharp aerobatic pilot. I just don't.
1,000 it might help will make you train for the wrong thing for the other 999 times.
Yeah. That's probably good advice. Yeah. Anything else I can, and you guys are at, let me stop this for a moment and let me do this. Shoots fire. You're at, what airfield are you at again?
Regional.
KBLS. Oh no.
BBS.
Skagit?
Yes.
Skagit.
Skagit. Near Skagit.
So let's just talk about your airfield here for just a second. So as I look at this airfield and I come in here and I say, let me get measure, let me Dutch, I want it there. I wanted it right there. So this is Google Earth. For 500 feet between your taxiway and your runway, probably in pretty good shape. At 500 feet, I wouldn't have any concerns at all. If there was a helicopter in either place and I was in the other place, that's even a big helicopter, I would say that your 500 feet number is really good. Coming off of here to, let's say, here. Oh, I'm sorry. Measure distance. 260, 70 feet to this cut line right here. You know, if the helicopter was doing some maneuvering in this area, I wouldn't be too concerned. If they were up in this area, I'd be concerned. Whoops. Let's see. You know, I start parking helicopters over here. That's probably a pretty good place, frankly. I could, you know, if I'm a landing guy, if I'm a landing helicopter, I can land in this area and get in and out of here pretty easy. I don't have a lot of noise issues for me to get in and out of here. Let's see. If you parked me over here, I'm feeling pretty comfortable behind me. I can take off from the ramp out over this tree area, not knowing what your regulations are and that kind of stuff. But it's a safe area for me to take off and land in and out of here.
It's the other run.
Down here, okay. So, yo, man, you're close here. Holy criminelli.
We didn't know them about it.
120 feet. Yeah, yeah, everything's too close down here. If the helicopter, on the other hand, is doing some hover work, maintenance, or training or whatever, and let me go from the taxiway right here out to this cut line, 150 feet, 145 feet. So if they're over in this area, I wouldn't be too concerned at a taxi. At least you wouldn't be in a flight mode. I would want, if I was a helicopter pilot and I was doing taxi work, hover work, and this, I would want to be over this, past this cut line here. This area, probably okay. Up in here, probably okay. This would be great. I mean, I would love to be able to flight train or fly helicopters out of here, because there's places I can get away and not be a bother to you, or you'd be a bother to me. You've got this ramp area right here. Yeah, if you park the helicopter in this area where this wind boom airplane is, whatever it is. Up in here, not so much. Over here, kind of okay. The beautiful thing is, depending upon winds, I could take off from here this direction and not be a problem to you at all. So just some things to think about as you think about your airport and your operations. And I love airports that have designated helipads or helicopter landing and parking areas, because what that tells me is hopefully, hopefully that they have, well, clearly they've had a conversation about the helicopter piece. Hopefully everybody remembers it and they don't crowd the area. There's one airport near us that has a designated helipad and a parking area, and they don't put anything else around that at all. I mean, they treat that like the Holy Grail. And as a result, they get a boatload of transient helicopter traffic because the guys feel and gals feel comfortable going in and out of there and getting gas and not having to worry about anything. What else can I help you with? What other questions do you have?
I would assume if there's a helicopter at the approach end of the runway, he's on the ground, and if he's not producing any lift, is he creating any kind of a problem?
No. If we're at flat pitch, we're doing pretty much nothing as far as a downwash is concerned. I mean, yeah, let go of a piece of paper, it would flitter away for sure, but nothing really dramatic is going to happen when we're at flat pitch. And that's a term that we use, flat pitch, pull pitch. We use those terms. So you can see that happening. You can hear it. You might hear a pilot say, "I'm pulling pitch now." That means they're getting ready to go up into a hover. Better get your attention. You might say, "Can you hold it a minute until I get past you?" Yeah, sure. Be glad to.
So that's kind of analogous to an airplane, when it actually rotates and lifts off, that's where the lift is occurring. And
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, sure. The airplane's still creating some prop wash behind it, even in an idle, but that's because there's pitch in the prop, and it's designed to do that. We at flat pitch, every helicopter is a little different. I think there's always a little bit of pitch to it, but obviously not enough to create enough lift for us to fly, or would be flying already. Well, gang, thank you for taking your time. Let me be a part of your meeting. I appreciate it. Pass the word. Thepilotsgrind.com. There's a whole section in there on the topic. You can get the PDF and download it and print it in all the way up to 11 by 17. You can print it in some pretty big posters. Have at it. That's what it's there for. I'm hoping that, if we save one pilot from one mishap, we're all better off, right?
It's a good brief. Thank you.
Take care, everybody. Be good.
Thank you.